And I did not start the recording. So I finally turned on screen recording so that I could capture and share all of this. And now I forgot that the heat is running and is messing with the audio recording. So let me go turn that off and I'll be right back to record one more time.
3, 2, 1, 0.
The No Channel.
Welcome to what will be one of the last episodes of Kubernetes the Hardest Way. And by last episode, I really mean last episode for a little while. There'll be at least one more and possibly two more in the series to come this year. And then this winter, so probably starting in December, I'm going to redo the series with Kubernetes, probably 119. Is my guess. It's going to be 118 or 119 that I'm going to then redo the series with. The reason it's been a little while since I posted my last Kubernetes the Hardest Way video is I wasn't really happy with my initial videos. Those were the first videos I had ever produced, and I learned a lot doing them. And I really wanted to revamp the way the Kubernetes the Hardest Way videos were being done. And this is the start of that. So I went through a lot of work to try to redo it in a way that was going to be a lot easier to follow and just in general, easier to watch. This episode is all about the worker nodes. So now we have a control plane. As you can see here, we have our etcd cluster. We have a control plane. One of the control planes actually got deleted. It was me proving that it would still work with one of the control plane nodes missing, but I actually literally deleted it, so it no longer exists. And then we have our load balancer and our workers. So this is our current cluster state. If it was production, I would say that you need to add another control plane, but I don't really care. So what we need to do now is add a worker node. And these worker nodes really only have one major component to them, and that is the kubelet. Really, most everything is configuring the kubelet, your kube proxy, as well as your container runtime. So in this case, we're going to use containerd. It could be cryo, it could be Docker, whatever, Kata containers, whatever your container runtime is going to be. So in my next Kubernetes the Hardest Way, we're going to set up a worker node in each of the flavors. It just takes time. It's not very difficult. And I'll show you, and I'll call out in this one when it is and what you would change to support cryo or the other container runtimes. All right, so let's jump into some code. One of the first things that you're going to notice that's different is I made a repository to go with this. And I had been just relying on the Kubernetes the Hard Way Kelsey Hightower repository. I've now actually made my own, I'm going to say fork, except it's kind of mostly redoing it. And it's going to allow more opinionated KVM things that will let you copy and paste easier. So the things that we change are going to be changed in those, and you won't have to remember when you're doing it. So that's another thing that's going to come around with the Kubernetes the Hardest Way part, or take 2, is we're going to do it in a way where it's going to have its own repository, and it's going to let you follow along a little bit easier if you wanted to. All right, let's see. We need to go to w1.example.com. All right. Let's see what we have here. All right. We pulled the examples repository. So you can see right here, we pulled examples, and that is the repository with all the files that we did. I also pushed the gen out. So gen is all the generated files. So you can see this is all of our certs that we generated. So again, you don't want to copy and paste your certs all over the world in a production environment. This is not a production environment. It's not even something I'm going to run for fun things on in my house. So before everybody goes hollering about how I copied certs around, I know. All right, so let's move on then. I'm sorry, my laptop is a little noisy. The GPU encoders decided that they wouldn't work to capture the screen today for some reason, and thus it's encoding with the CPU, and it's trying to take off. It's doing its levitating game right now. All right, what were we doing? All right, we're going to install these things. So sudo zipper install I have 2 installs. All right, so on Leap, it's contract tools. And all right, so we have all the required tools already on here. And now, one thing that you want to make sure that you do on the worker nodes, especially, I do this on the control plane nodes, but you don't necessarily have to, except that most control plane nodes in most production environments, as I've said before, run the kubelet. And if they're running the kubelet, they also need to have this, but you'll need to turn swap off. And you'll want to look up for your OS how to keep it off. But to just turn it off simply, you can do sudo swap off -a, and it is now off. This is because the scheduler wants to schedule out every piece of available memory, and it gets messy. Not that it couldn't handle it. I think that it's something that Kubernetes should look into, is having maybe a few different types of schedulers, ones that prioritize different types of resources. Right now, the scheduler is really dominant on it owns all memory, and it won't work with swap. So you need to turn swap off. The next thing that you're going to do is make a bunch of directories. Let's look over these. So this first one is the CNI network directory. This is where we're going to put the configurations for that. The next one is the containerd configuration. That's our container runtime configuration. The next one after that is the bin configuration, the CNI bin. This is where we're going to install it. And then you have the kubelet, the kube proxy, Kubernetes, and var run Kubernetes. So we're going to make those really quickly. Now that we have those, we are going to download all of our binaries. This is kube proxy, kubelet, kubectl. We have containerd. We have the CNI plugins. We have runc, and we have cryctl. All right, so while these downloaded, and now they should all be right here, we can install the binaries. So again, these are just all the files. I'm just going to try to go through as quickly. I'll probably just do a montage here. If you're not familiar with Linux that much, what you're doing here is giving these things cryctl, kubectl, kubeproxy, kubelet, and runc the execute permission so they can be executed and run. All right. So this is moving the binaries, and finally we're going to move containerd. Beautiful. All right, so this is my cryctl. So this is the pod cider that you'll need to put in there yourself. So this is what my pod cider is for this node. And yeah, so you'll need to get this and set this. And then this is the 10 bridge conf, and put it in etc cni netd. And then the next thing that you'll need to do is the 99 loopback. And the 99 loopback looks like this. You shouldn't have to make any changes to this file. It should be this. All right. Now let's move on to configuring the container runtime. And this is where it will change if you are running in a different container runtime. So if you're not running containerd, but running, let's say, cryo or any of the other, or Docker, since we're not using Docker. So there is the kubeconfig, or the config toml, and you can find that, and it needs put here. So this is us configuring containerd. The other ones would have their own way of configuring them. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same. This should be the same for everybody. For yours, you shouldn't have to edit it. Just make sure it's in the right place. I didn't need to. All right. And then you're going to want to edit this file. You could change that to have some other stuff. It's not in the scope of this on modifying containerd and whatnot. But yeah, and then you're going to want to make sure that you set up the service to find it right, find it correctly. So you see exec start, we're telling it where to start the container, and that's about it. Where to start the container. Let me redo that. So here it's a very simple service. We're just telling it where it is, pretty much. And yeah. That wasn't helpful at all. I need to think of something more to say with that. All right, so now we need to configure the kubelet, and we need to configure it and tell it where everything is. Not only this, the kubelet is the thing that's going to need our certs that we made. And it's going to need to know how to talk to the control plane. So let's look at the files that we need to do. So here is the first thing. We are going to run this. Now this path isn't quite right. We don't need the dot here. We just need a single dot. So we are moving, these are the certs that the kubelet's going to run, and we're moving them into varlib kubelet. Although this should be 1. Let's just make sure I did that correctly. Cubelet. All right, beautiful. 1 second. Yes. So we did the key.pem and the pem, and let's see, we have. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is move the kube config to where it's going to be expected. And that's this here. So we're just, again, 1. And we're moving it here into the kubelet kube config. All right, The next thing that we're going to want to do is move the kubelet config YAML. So this is, watch the video on the kube configs. This is just your kube config that you made for your worker. And it's pretty simple. It's telling it where it can hit the load balancer, which is this. So we're routing all traffic to the load balancer. So this is set up to hit the load balancer, and the load balancer passes it on. And the certs that it's going to use to make those calls. So that is it. And then let's check out the Cubelet service. So we're going to run the Cubelet as a service. Unlike in, again, most production based off of kubeadm, is going to run it as a static pod manifest. But here we are going to, let's do vim systemd system Cubelet. So again, all these files are right there for you. All you have to do is copy them to these locations. Where you need to copy them is also documented. So if you're trying to learn and understand where these files go, that's all there. All right. So this is where you're telling it where your container runtime is. So again, if you were using something different, you wouldn't be using the var run container dsock. You would be using the cryo sock or the docker sock, or I think you get the idea. Other than that, we're giving it the kubelet config YAML. This tells it where its kube config is and all of those fun little details on how to connect to the control plane. And yeah, the network plugin, we're using the CNI network plugin, and register the node. So, and restart on failure. I think that's on every single one of them. Absolutely every single one of them. Probably should be if it's a service. I don't know. All right. So the next thing we need to do is configure kubeproxy. So again, this is pretty simple. You're going to first move the things kubeproxy needs, which kubeproxy needs its kube config. And so move its kube config that you generated at the very beginning of this, and we can look at what that looks like. We haven't copied it out there. I thought I did. All right. Now we can look at what it looks like. So this is again, just another kube config, and it's just telling kubeproxy where to go and how to connect to it. All right, you're not quite done with kubeproxy. The next things that you're going to have to do is go ahead and configure it. So there's a kubeproxy config that is here. So this is going to just tell it's informing it of how it's supposed to do your job. We're using IP tables, and this is our cluster CIDR. And then here is the kube config that we just copied out. That's the location of it. So it's a pretty simple configuration. There's more complex configurations that you can get into, but for all of our needs right now, this will do fine. I think actually I want to do an entire video set on Kubernetes networking and how everything layers together with service meshes and whatnot. And that's probably a good series of videos. All right, then the last thing that we need to do is write the Cubelet service itself. So let's go ahead and look at that. So this is the Cubelet service. You are again giving it, oh, this is the Cubelet service. I meant to pull up the kubeproxy service. So let's get out of this. done. I was going to say that looked way too much. The kube proxy does not need to know where the container runtime is. So if you're supplying that to a thing, it's probably not the kube proxy. All right. So again, it's just telling it where to start it and configuring it with very easy configuration. Just that config that we looked at. All right. Moving on. The only thing that you have to do is start everything. So at this point, you can run daemon reload. So you need to do daemon reload because we just put in new service files. And so you're going to have to reload systemctl. And then here we're enabling containerd, kubelet, kubeproxy. This is done in a two-part step, but I've learned to now do now. So if you run enable with now will let's look at that. So a lot of times examples will tell you to do enable and then to do start. And I've done that for a long time. And lo and behold, you can just do -- now and you don't have to do this start. So I'm only explaining it because I didn't want you to think that I didn't also start them. Because a lot of times you'll see something like this that actually starts the things, but ours are already started and we can check on them. So let's do sudo systemctl status. And as you can see, our containerd service is active and running and we are good to go. So the only last thing to do is, can we see worker 1 in Kubernetes? So let's go check that out. We're not going to be able to from the worker here. So let's go. Sometimes when I'm exiting SSH, I hope other people do this, but sometimes when I'm exiting SSH, I try to do :Q. It should stop an SSH session. All right, we need to find, there's our admin kube config. That's exactly what I was going to say. We need to find our admin kube config because I haven't been on this machine for like ever. And so hopefully everything is still actually working. If not, we're going to have a debugging lesson inside this lesson. Actually, that's another good series. I'm going to create a debugging Kubernetes series. Thank you for that information. Actually, if you would want a whole series on debugging Kubernetes problems, how about you hit me up a comment, tell me what type of debugging, what object you're wanting to debug, because it's the API server, it's etcd, or the whole thing as a whole. And I'll make a series on that because I think it's really important. Anyways, let's go ahead and kubectl, is it installed? Sweet. Kubectl get nodes kube config. Let's see, admin kube config. So we can see here that worker 1 or worker 0 is there but not ready. Worker 1 isn't there, so something went wrong. Let's go ahead and check it out. I think I actually know why it didn't, because I actually think I joined it to the cluster a while ago and then I deleted it so that I could re-record it. And it's probably saying that it already exists and this is like an imposter node. That's my current guess. And worker 0, I was breaking on purpose, so it's not expected to work. So let's do sudo kubectl status kubelet. Yeah. All right, so it is saying the node, let's all right. Oh, whoops. Check this out. This is a configuration issue, which is really good. All right, so we copied the wrong file somewhere, because what this is telling me is that this is either it's passing node 0 at some point. So let's go through some of our files and look at where we accidentally used node 0. I'm sure that I accidentally copied. When I'm going back and editing this in future me, I'm going to see, I copied 0. So let's see. When we're copying here, this is, let's see. Let's go ahead and check these out. I don't think that, no, that's not going to, no. It's going to be probably the kubelet. So let's check out the kubelet. Let's do the kubelet. Uh-oh. You guys see what I see? I see a 0. So let's remove those. And then we need to do 0.temp. All right. So now let's check our cube config and make sure that our cube config isn't pointing towards those zeros. So sudo vim var lib. You'd think that I learned to type yesterday. I tell you what, as soon as you start recording, everything that you could possibly go wrong does go wrong. So yeah, here we are using the wrong file. So let's change this to 1. Let's also check the cube config. Did I mistype that? Yes, I did. All right, and this should have a node of 1, yes. And this was the mismatch that it was talking about. Cool. So let's do we're going to need to do the daemon reload because did we edit it? I think we did. And then let's do a restart on that. Actually, you know what? Let's restart all of them. Let's spell correctly. And then we'll give it just a second. And then we'll do the we'll check and see if this is actually working. Oh, look at this. Successfully registered node 1. So let's go ahead and get out of this. Let's jump back to our control plane node. And there you have it. We have set up a worker node. as soon as you know the parts in it, it's really not that bad. There are, even on the worker nodes, I know I say I'm sure that I oversimplify it, something that we do as software engineers time and time again. I have not seen a software engineer that doesn't oversimplify a problem. So it's not just you or me, but none of it is too daunting. They're mostly pretty easy configurations. All of those configuration files were pretty stock and standard. The biggest things that you were seeing was just telling it where the configuration files were and setting up the certificates. So don't hesitate. You can do it. I'm glad that we got to see how they could break and kind of debugging some of that. So I hope that was a little bit helpful. And yeah. Thank you very much for watching. The last thing that we need to do here is set up the pod networking. So right now the nodes are networked, but the pods that run in the nodes don't know how to communicate to other pods on other nodes. They could talk to the ones on the nodes. So this is generally solved by installing something like Calico, Cilium, or Flannel, or Weave, or there's a lot of them, but these are the CNI network plugins, and you can install which one you want. We're going to do a really quick and dirty way here, and that will be the last video. And then we'll do some more Kubernetes ones, but they'll be like debugging or whatnot. Actually, leave me comments on what would be the most helpful for Kubernetes. And I will cover that next as soon as we do the networking. Honestly, though, I think the networking should be its own video. We can kind of set up pod networking routes with IP tables and whatnot, but it really doesn't matter at this point. And understanding service meshes and networking as a whole is very important. So that might be my whole next series of videos, is just on Kubernetes networking. It shouldn't be a mini videos, but a few. Anyways, leave me comments on what you'd like to see and what would be most helpful to you in this series. And then also let me know if you're looking forward to the reboot, if this was easier to follow and a little bit nicer a format. And if it is, like it, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. If you really didn't like this video, didn't find it helpful, didn't find it entertaining at any way, go ahead and subscribe anyways, and stick around and see if these videos get any better for science.